Hey everybody, welcome to Draft Review 338. Today we're going to talk about Red7. This is a new game from Asmodee Games, designed by Carl Chuduk, and Chris will have to forgive me, Chris Schislik. Sorry. Chris is also, I believe, the owner of Asmodee Games, so this is a co-design effort, and it's a very simple, quick card game. Let's just jump into how it works and I'll tell you what I think about it. The Red7 is made up of a deck of cards of 7 colors with 7 numbers for each color, 1 through 7. And players will be dealt, you guessed it, 7 cards. And then each player will be dealt 1 card face up in front of them. The player to the left of the player with the highest card is going to start. So in this case, of course, the player with the 7 is the highest. And going around the table, the player with the green 2 will start. Now what if 2 players were dealt a 7? So in this case, we'd have a tie for highest. In this case, we'd have to consult our color reference guide. We can see the hierarchy of colors in case of breaking ties. So red is the highest, so hence the highest card in the game is the Red7. All the way down from orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. So the lowest card would be the 1 violet. In the center of the table, we will put the starting rule card, and you can see here it says, you are currently playing red, highest card wins. Now there's a couple of things you can do on your turn. A, you can play a new card to your palette. B, you can play a new card to the canvas, and this is where the rules are. And when you play a card to the canvas, you're effectively changing the rule or changing what it means to be winning the game. Finally, you can play a card to your palette and to the canvas, changing the rule. And the thing to keep in mind with this is you always have to be winning the game at the end of your turn. If there's nowhere for you to play the card to change the rule or add a card to your palette to make it so that you're winning, then you're out. You're out for the round. So let's quickly go through the different rules that can be in the game. First, we've got red. We always start the game with red, highest card wins. So you may just, for example, play this yellow 7, which is a pretty high card. If that's all it takes, you play the card and then you're good. Go on to the next player. The next rule, the orange rule, is most of one number is winning. So in this case, let's say I played a 6 here. Now I've got 2 6s. And if nobody else has more than 2 of a single number, then I'm winning. Now again, if somebody is tied with me, let's say I had 2 6s and you had 2 4s, we both have 2 of the same number, but I have the higher. Now let's say you had 2 4s and I had 2 4s. Well, then whoever had the higher color would win. So you always break ties by the highest number in the set, whatever we're doing, and then if there's a tie there as well, then it's of course the highest color. So the next rule is most of one color wins. And we can see here we've got 2 greens. They're very low greens. There's a 1 and a 2. So if somebody else had 2 of a color like a 4 and a 6, then they would be winning. Next rule is most even cards. If we go back to our set here, we can see we have 3 even cards. We're in pretty good shape here because 2 of these are 6s. And there's no other higher even, of course, than a 6. Next is most different colors. Going back to our previous example, we've got 3 different colors. We've got the green, the blue, and the indigo. And within that set, the 6 is the highest number, so we're also in pretty good shape here. Next to last is most cards in a row. Going back to our previous example, we can see we've got a 1 and a 2, and most cards in a row again is just like a straight. So if we had a 3 tucked in here somewhere, then we'd have a 1, 2, 3. And finally, the violet rule is most cards below 4 wins. Again, going back to our previous example, we have a 1 and a 2, so we have 2 cards below 4. So again, very simply, you're either playing a card to your palette to hopefully match the existing rule that's out in the center of the table, or you're playing a new rule, a new color out to the center of the table to change the rule, or you're doing both. Now the thing to keep in mind is if you do both, you've got to play to your palette first and then to the canvas in the center of the table. That's very important. I'll explain why. Now let's say we had played something to our palette and then now played a card here to the canvas to change the rule to most even cards. We're in pretty good shape here because we've got a 2, a 6, and a 6. We've got 3 even cards, one of them is a 6, so that's pretty high. Now because we played a card to the canvas, we're going to count the number of cards we have. In this case, it's 4 in front of us. Now 7 is higher than 4, and that's great because when you play a card to the canvas that's higher than the number of cards that you have, you get to draw a new card from the deck. This advanced rule is very interesting because you want to play high cards down to your own thing because when it comes to tiebreakers, you're going to be more easily able to break that if you've got a bunch of 7s. And so you maybe have more different colors or more of the same color, same number or whatever. If you've got higher cards, you're more than likely going to be in better shape because you're going to break the tiebreakers. And the tiebreakers do come into play quite a bit. But if you want to give yourself more options, you can play higher cards towards that center to allow you to draw more cards and keep your hand size in, because again, what you're trying to do is stay alive and stay, in the game as long as you can, because no matter what, your options are going to diminish. So I would say always play with that advanced rule. Now there are some optional rules to play with, and let me show you those first and I'll tell you my thoughts about them. So the optional rules all come into play when you play an odd numbered card to your own palette. And we can see here icons in the upper corner of the 1, 3, 5, and 7, and they all have different effects that they do. So let's walk through these. So when you play a 1 to your palette, you can actually take a card from another player's palette and place it face down on top of the deck. So the 1 card, which was kind of like the worthless card, has now become the most evil card in the deck. And you can really jack somebody up with this, especially earlier in the game. If you play 1 to your set, and then you take the 1 card that they have to start the game with in front of them and then slap it down on top of the deck, then they start off very gimped. But again, you've kind of gimped yourself by playing a 1 as well. If you play a 3 card, you draw a card from the deck, so this is very handy as well. The 5 is very tricky. This says play another card from your hand. And the key thing to know about these effects is that you must do them. So even if you didn't really want to do it, when you play the 5, you've got to play another card. Now it's a nice way to catch up and get a bunch of cards out, but it's just something you got to keep in mind. And finally, the 7 is the most tricky. This says discard a card from your palette to the canvas. It must be legal, so you must be winning the new colors game. The 7 is the trickiest to explain because again, you're playing it to your palette and you're taking a card from your palette and then moving it to the center, changing the rule with that card. So you're kind of down a card in a way, but you might have a rule out there on your palette that you really need, but you don't have that rule in your hand, so you can't do it. Now the other thing to know is that if you do trigger the whole draw a card, if you played a higher card from the palette, then you can go ahead and do that. So what do I think about the optional rules? I really enjoy them. Now others I have played with don't quite enjoy them as much, not across the board, but they add some complexity to the game in a game that should take I don't know, 5 minutes per hand. It can go a little bit longer with this because you're really piecing together your options. You have a lot of options in your hand. You've got the whole thing about changing the rule, which card do I play here, which rules will be probably better for me later in the game, and now you've had all these special abilities and things, and you can really screw people up. Who do I target, all this stuff. So I like them, and to me it's like, I know I've talked to people and they don't really like this game as much, and again, I said I didn't really like it when I first played it. I've really come to enjoy the game quite a bit, and so I think the optional rules, well, I'll just play that with people that like Red 7. And if you're not a huge fan of Red 7, you don't really get into it, then I'd maybe leave the optional rules out. But I always would play with the advanced rule, because otherwise I don't know why you would play the game ever. I really have enjoyed this game. It's really grown on me. Like I said, I played an earlier version, left a bad taste in my mouth, but the new version is very enjoyable. I mean, I don't want to oversell it where it's like this hugely complex strategic thing, but for a 5-minute game, or 5 minute per hand, it's very cool. And I will say, let's talk about player count, because it plays 2, 3, and 4 player. 4 players way too many, especially when you add in the optional rules, unless everybody is really into it and everybody's playing quickly and everybody's played it a lot, and then I would play it 4 player. But if you have new people, you're trying to do the optional rules and all this stuff, then I really like it as a 2-player game, and I really like it as a 3-player game. Now the one thing I didn't talk about is you can actually score it over multiple hands. Normally you can just kind of play it and then, okay, you won this hand and then Billy won the next hand or whatever. Now the way that you score it is you have a different target number of points based on the number of players. But if it goes around and then you're the last one in, everybody else has been eliminated, then all of the cards that you have in your palette that satisfy the current rule, you take those out of the game, put those in a score pile. So if it said like most cards under 4, and I had 3 cards, I had 2 1s and a 2, I'd take those out, put them in, and I would have 4 points for that round. Or you can try to score it with something that would give you a lot more points. So if you had like the most different colors, well then let's say you had 4 different colors and they were like a 6, a 5, a 7, and another 5 and another color. That's a lot of points, and that'll get you like halfway probably to your goal. So that's very interesting, especially in a 2-player game, because you might even feel like you're not really going to do well this hand, so you can just bail out and pass and do nothing. And the other person scores 5 points because you got a feeling based on how the cards you have are going to work out that you're probably going to go out in a couple of rounds, and you don't want them stacking up a huge palette of stuff they're going to score a whole bunch of points for. So I really like that. I mean, that really adds a lot to the game, and that's where the the heavier sort of strategic part comes in. And you can still play around with that in the 3-player, and that might be some decision that you make later on in the round based on which rule. Like, well, I can satisfy this rule or this rule. And I'm like, well, if I do this rule and I stay in, I'm going to get a lot of points, and this one's going to be like 4. But it might be more risky and things. The other really cool thing is, I don't want to oversell the strategicness of it, but there is a certain amount of drama in here where I've seen a game where I had like 8 cards, not 8, I'm exaggerating. I had like 5 cards left, and a player had already been eliminated. One guy was down to 2 cards, and he played, and he's like, well, wait a minute, let me play this one. This will let me draw a card. And then, he's like, oh, okay, I drew this card. Now I play this to the center. That allows me to draw another card. And then now he kind of recovered back from being in a position where he was totally, outnumbered by the amount of options and the cards that he had. So there's really fun swinginess to this game where you can really kind of chew, but there's also a lot of AP on this because you're like, oh, I could do this, or I could do this, I could do this, but that also drags the game down when it should be a quick game. But anyway, like I said, I enjoy it quite a bit. I know it gets compared to Flux and all that stuff and, whatever, but this is one. It's like a quick 5-minute game. You can break it out, play it 5 minutes, and be done and go do something else, or you can play it over 30 minutes or an hour and, keep track of points and all that stuff. So really, really well done. And the one thing that my friend said that was very interesting, he's like, it's very interesting because you have the split between having a certain number, a high number, and then the color. And it's almost like 2 parts of your brain working where, you have the color artistic, left-hand side, and then the right-hand side is the number counting side. So it really was difficult for him. He plays games all the time with us, but he was like, I don't know what it is. I can't get this game. Even though he would still win hands and get points and stuff, but he was like, it's too much. His turns would take forever. Anyway, so definitely take a look at it. If you're into it, then it sounds fun. It's not going to be for everybody, like I said, but I really have enjoyed this. So thanks.